What is Sky GODZ all about? Find out now. Hey everyone, thanks for coming back for the second part of the Sky GODZ storyline videos. Today we're actually going to talk about the storyline as I have it written by now. So it will be very informative. We'll give you a little bit of better idea what to expect. I'm going to try to make a few shorter videos after this. I mean, for some reason I just keep rambling on and the videos end up getting like 20 minutes, 30 minutes long, which is sort of like, you know, a little more than yeah, a little more than tolerable, especially because I always complain to people and say, oh, make 4 minutes, like videos under 10, 15 minutes. And because I guess everybody has a little bit the problem. They just keep talking and talking and talking. So I'm going to have like an update video up for you pretty shortly. It'll only be about a few minutes. Just to, you know, to tell you like what's been going on. A lot of things have been happening. I'm not going to talk too much about it here, but just come back in a couple days and the update video should be up there. So about the actual storyline. Before we start, I just want to quickly mention this is a completely fictional. I did not take this from anywhere, basically. There were some inspirations, obviously, you know, as I've showed in my last video, but just so, you know, yeah, you know how it is. It's sort of like the fictional characters. The whole storyline is basically created. It does not exist anywhere else. Again, you know, what is it really all about, basically? The whole Sky GODZ premise is based on the ancient astronaut theory, or the ancient alien theory. Sort of like the idea that humankind didn't develop like Darwin's evolutionary theory tells us, sort of like just by complete coincidence. Just, you know, we sort of, you've all seen that chart, that ridiculous chart of like the fish coming out of the water turning into like whatever, you know, a lizard, and that turning into a monkey, and the monkeys turning into human. That's sort of like the typical evolutionary idea. And Sky GODZ, without want to be like, you know, overly scientific or religious, basically the idea is essentially that there is an alien race, or multiple alien races in that case, coming to Earth and sort of seeding, you know, human, basically all life basically on the planet. For various forms, you know, there's consciousness involved, there's genetic manipulation involved, there's various means as to how that could possibly be done. And in Sky GODZ, we're going to zoom in on one particular element, and that's like an alien race called the Anunnaki. It's a humanoid race, although I have to say that in Sumerian literature, it has often been portrayed as bird people, reptilian people, but also as humanoids. And we're going to stick with the fact that they're going to be humanoids. For the simple fact that, you know, I think the Bible was pointed out basically that God created humans in his image. And it sort of like makes sense, you know. It's like if you're an alien race, you want to create life, especially like the Anunnaki created the life essentially to use that life, you know, for their own purposes. You will create something that's sort of like, you know, similar to what you are. Plus they couldn't come up with something from nothing. So they had to use existing primate stock that they could find on Earth here, and they sort of mixed that with their own DNA. So basically, our story starts with three characters from the Anunnaki universe. That is Enki, Enlil, and Nin. This is 2 brothers and 1 sister, so 3 siblings basically, coming to Earth, trying to find out why there has been this mysterious deaths of these hybrids that already have been created, basically, that just keep dying. Like pretty much as they're being created, they keep dying. And their father Anu from Nibiru sort of sent them to Earth and says, you guys go figure this out, make sure this is all working out well. So they come to Earth, and we don't really know much about anything at this point, basically, because what I really want to do is I want to bring the reader in very softly. Sort of like we learn a little bit about those 3. We learn their individual characters, We found out that Enki is basically Anu's their father is Anu. Anu is the supreme ruler of Nibiru. He's the big honcho, basically. He's the guy that keeps everything together. But he's old. He's like thousands of years old, and he's basically just being kept alive in this these Arcturian crystal gardens, where they sort of infuse him with life energy. Otherwise, he would have been dead a long time ago. But he's got a lot of power, basically, and he still reigns above his children. And the idea is also that one of the children essentially needs to like follow him on a throne at some point. But they're all sort of like, lack of a better word, kind of fuck ups. And, they're neurotic like we are. And they're sort of like, they're spoiled. They're just basically anything that you would expect from celebrity, rich kids, basically. And although I don't want to go like too over the top here, I don't want it to be like snotty or like, sort of really annoying or anything like that. But, Enki, for example, is very clearly has been his father's favorite son. And therefore, he's got certain expectations. He's got a certain level of arrogance. And he expects things to be done, Enlil, who actually comes from a different mother than Enki. He's never really been his father's favorite son, and there's definitely like a way of like he's being sort of disgruntled, suffers from low self-esteem because he wants to live up to his father's expectations, and because of that there's been a severe civil rivalry between those two. They don't really like each other too terribly much. They're sort of like at odds with each other, which actually is pretty much going to be a lot of the story motivation for many, many, many parts of this. The sort of like the siblings, the feud between those two brothers, which sort of like also like is a really nice symbol for the dualism that we have on this planet. Sort of the left, right, the good and evil, blah, blah, blah. So everything is dualistic, basically. And those two basically are exactly like they're complete opposites with opposite goals, and they really don't get along. And as we find out later, I don't think I'm going to spoil anything here, but somewhere down the road, I'm talking about season 3 and 4, the one is going to create Lemuria, Mu, the other one's going to create Atlantis, and both of those basically are going to be feuding with each other and essentially, cancel each other out. Also interesting that they also have like a very specific animal that's attached, or like a symbol attached to them. So Enki is essentially he's the leader of the snake, and Enlil is the leader of the eagle. And the eagle is very significant, basically, if you think about it, because Enlil is going to found Atlantis. Atlantis essentially is going to morph into some of the high civilizations in recent history, like the Romans. And the Romans, they had the eagle. Then eventually the American Empire, that we still today is the strongest nation, whatever that means, the eagle again, so all the nations, basically the war nations that sort of came in recent history, they used the eagle as their symbol, as sort of like descendants of like the Enlil race. So you see how I'm sort of like really thinking this out very big, like in a large context of history. So back to the main story. They come to Earth, and they realize there's a lot of things wrong, basically. For example, that the scientist who has been in charge here on Earth, and I should also say the Anunnaki had 2 bases on Earth. There's one they call the Eridu base, that's in the Two River area, which is today's like in the ancient Mesopotamia, today's Iran, the Iraq area, basically. The Euphrates and the Tigris River. And they have a second base, and that one is like a Lake Titicaca in the Andes Mountain by Bolivia. And that's sort of like more of like a military base. That base is more to sort of fend off the Dracos, fend off the Greys, just sort of keep the other races in check. Because as we find out later in down the road in the storyline, there's a lot of races who want to claim on Earth, basically. So they come basically into the space, and they realize there's a lot of things going really wrong. And they realize that the head scientist Sargon is basically real scumbag. He's been mismanaging the base, he's been managing the hybrid program, he's been mismanaging everything to his own advantage because he's got a beef with Anu from the time when Anu was still on the Earth. And as the story goes on, basically, a lot of things are being rolled out. A lot of like secrets that have been hidden mostly from the past are being revealed. We find, for example, out that that there has been another person that we will not find out until about the fourth episode, who exactly that is. But we always see him sort of like in the shadow, outside of the base, in the jungle. He's clearly some kind of a jungle dweller or some sort of like a weird kind of guy. We don't really know what it's about until we find out that he is actually Anu's old partner in the creation of the hybrids, and Anu has been has him banished because he's been sort of like how should I say this, playing around with his mistress. And so it was sort of love triangle gone wrong. And then Anu, because let's be honest, he's a supreme ruler, he just didn't want to deal with it, so he just kicked him out, left him to die in a jungle. But Sargon, the scientist on a base, did help him survive, and eventually he sort of like was taken in by an underground race called the Nagas. It's like a reptilian underground race. And they took him in, and that's where he actually found a huge secret too, which helped him eventually, continue the hybrid program. So I know it sounds all a little bit complicated when I say it like that. When you literally see it as animation or as a comic, basically, just one step at a time. It's one of those things about writing. It has to be very logical. It has to be very structured. It's usually like the movies that are not structured that you lose very quickly interest in. And it's the movie that are really well structured that you generally have an interest in. And that there has to be a payoff, and the payoff usually has to be set up. And I think that's sort of like my complaint with a lot of modern movies, like modern, as in like, superhero movies and stuff. There's an interesting premise maybe, but there is really no real payoff, especially also like in the sci-fi area. A particular good thing are those new Star Wars movies. We all know Star Wars, we all love the early Star Wars stuff, but there's no new payoff, there's nothing new being created. So that's why I wanted the premise to be relatively complex, so there would be a real good payoff basically at the end. And as we find out stuff, it would make sense, and we sort of all tie in together. Now, I don't really want to spoil everything, basically, because there are some big turning points. There's some big spoilers. The first season will have about 6 episodes. And then I've written outlines for about season 2 to season 9, so that will be in the next 10 years. And that's season 9 will end up in Egypt. So it literally goes through all of the high civilizations. Now, what's really important too is that this is only one of the plot lines. There's lots of other plot lines too. We have the plot lines of an alien war, like the Dracos. I mentioned the Dracos a couple times, and I even showed some pictures last time. The Dracos are an ancient reptilian race. They're very, very, very old. They're one of the oldest races and one of the early ones to actually have space travel. They're about 4 or 5 billion years old. And they were on Earth a long time ago. I mean, a long time ago. And because they have been here a long time ago, they think, planet Earth is sort of their planet. And they don't really like the Anunnaki. They don't really like the seeding of the new race. They don't really like any of it. But the problem is because the Galactic Federation is very powerful. They have the Arcturian light ships, which are enormously powerful, and are powerful beyond what the Dracos have. This sort of keeps them in check. But of course, they're always looking for an excuse to cause some problem. So at the end of the first episode, there is a gray, I call him Tau. He eventually becomes a scout for the Anunnaki Andean base. He escapes in an orb because the Dracos, they have been mercilessly torturing the Greys. Just literally torturing the crap out of him. Treating him badly, and he was just fed up. He says, I'm out of here. He was able to escape, and he was basically being pursued by two Draco fighters. But in the very last second, the Anunnaki came in, shot down the Dracos, and saved the Grey. And of course, now that gives the Dracos a really good reason to say, hey, they took the Grey from us, basically. Now we got a reason to retaliate. You know how those things start with like those false flag, pretense wars and stuff like that. And so they basically say, well, why are we just confining this to Earth? Maybe we should just start a big ruckus all over the universe again, basically. Aligning themselves with the Orion Empire, which are mostly the Richelian Greys, and some other Draco races, basically. And let's just really kick the Galactic Federation's ass. Let's just get this done and over with. So we have this story of this brewing war. There's also another incident that the Galactic Federation at some point sends an embassy, like ambassadors to Earth to try to straighten out the things. The ambassadors are usually the mantis beings because they're very peaceful, they're very smart, they're very gentle. However, this does not end good. That's episode 4. I can tell you that already. This is going to be a disaster. This is going to make things much, much worse for everybody. So we have like this situation of like the Anunnaki trying to figure out what are we going to do with the humans. Who's the really guilty person that keeps killing? Why are they dying? And then we have Samana, the guy in the Naga's caves who creates his own mankind, humankind. All that basically against the cosmic brewing war. Of course, as you can imagine, this will be a powder keg by the end of the first season. And there will be some level of closure. I mean, I don't like those things on television where like you watch like 6 episodes and at the end there's like a cliffhanger and it says, yeah, we'll come back in a year. I think that's completely stupid. There has to be a payoff. You have to be satisfied. Yes, you will not be able to tie up maybe every storyline completely, but it has to be somewhat satisfying for people to come back for a second season. So that's basically what I want to do. I don't want to really tell too terribly much more about it because there is quite lots of little details. There's a lot of symbolism. I'm gonna stay away from the biblical nonsense, just because, first of all, it's been overdone, and everybody's coming up with Enoch, and everybody's coming up with the same tired old things. And I don't really want this to be like going too much into like a religious type of thing. So I'm gonna steer clear. There will be some references to Eden in the first season. There will be some references to Lucifer, like the devil, fallen angel in the first season. That's about it. Other than that, we're going to stay squarely like in a Sumerian, Indian, as in like Indian, the Vedic traditions basically. So we're going to use world mythology, and like I said, some of the inspirations that I've pointed out in my last video. Also, don't forget, follow on Instagram, and please subscribe. Need more subscribers. Been adding quite a few, so thank you for everybody who's been subscribing and everybody who's been sending me messages. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Always love to hear from you. Bye.